The hidden truth. They don't want you to know. What if everything you've been taught about the Bible was a carefully orchestrated lie designed to hide the most explosive truth in human history? For centuries, religious institutions have buried archaeological evidence, mistranslated ancient texts, and systematically erased the African identity of God's chosen people. Tonight, we're about to shatter the illusion that has kept humanity in spiritual darkness for over 2,000 years. The Vatican's secret archives contain documents that would revolutionize Christianity forever. Manuscripts written in ancient Ge'ez, Coptic, and Hebrew reveal that the biblical Israelites were unmistakably African, not the European-featured people depicted in Renaissance paintings that hang in churches worldwide. But this is just the beginning of what they've hidden from you. Dr. Sarah Mizrahi, a rogue biblical archaeologist who was mysteriously expelled from the Israeli Antiquities Authority, discovered something that made her question everything she'd been taught in seminary. Deep within the Ethiopian highlands, she uncovered stone tablets dating back 3,000 years. Tablets that contained genealogical records proving that King Solomon, King David, and even Moses himself were descendants of African lineages. When I held those tablets in my hands, Dr. Mizrahi recalls with tears in her eyes, I realized that everything we've been teaching in churches and synagogues around the world is a complete fabrication. The real chosen people have been systematically oppressed and told they have no biblical heritage. The implications are staggering. If the biblical patriarchs were African, then centuries of slavery, colonialism, and racial oppression take on an entirely different spiritual dimension. This isn't just about history, this is about a cosmic cover-up that has separated millions of people from their divine inheritance. Ancient Greek historians like Herodotus described the Ethiopians as the most just of men and noted that the gods themselves dined with them. Yet somehow, this reverence was erased from biblical interpretation. The Hebrew word Cush, mentioned over 30 times in the Old Testament, specifically refers to the African kingdoms south of Egypt, kingdoms that were integral to biblical history. And here's where it gets even more shocking: the Ark of the Covenant. The most sacred object in biblical history isn't lost as mainstream archaeology claims. It's been sitting in Ethiopia for over 2,500 years, guarded by priests who have maintained an unbroken lineage back to the time of King Solomon. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has preserved rituals, songs, and sacred knowledge that predate European Christianity by centuries. But why would religious authorities want to hide this truth? The answer will disturb you to your core. When Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity in 313 AD, he needed to make it palatable to the Roman Empire. African Christianity, with its mystical traditions, divine feminine principles, and revolutionary messages about equality, threatened the power structure he was trying to build. So began the systematic whitewashing of biblical characters and the suppression of African Christian traditions. Ancient frescoes in Ethiopian churches show Jesus, Mary, and the apostles with distinctly African features. These aren't artistic interpretations. They're historical records painted by people who maintained direct cultural connections to the biblical era. Yet Western Christianity has consistently dismissed these depictions as primitive or inaccurate. The genetic evidence is equally explosive. Modern DNA studies of Jewish populations reveal significant African ancestry, particularly among Sephardic and Mizrahi communities. The Lemba people of Zimbabwe carry the Cohen genetic marker, proving their descent from biblical priests. Ethiopian Jews, despite facing discrimination from some Israeli authorities, possess ancient religious practices that predate rabbinical Judaism. Dr. Spencer Wells, a population geneticist, discovered that all modern humans share common African ancestors, meaning that Adam and Eve, if they existed, were undeniably African. Yet religious art continues to depict them as European, perpetuating a racial lie that has infected global consciousness. But here's what they really don't want you to No, the Dead Sea Scrolls contain passages that were deliberately excluded from the modern Bible, passages that explicitly describe the physical appearance of biblical figures in ways that confirm their African heritage. The Book of Enoch, removed from the biblical canon, contains prophecies about the scattering and eventual restoration of the African people that are playing out in real time today. Ancient coins from biblical times show African featured rulers. Archaeological excavations in Israel consistently uncover artifacts with African artistic influences. Even the Star of David has roots in ancient African spiritual symbols. The evidence is overwhelming, but it's been systematically suppressed. Religious seminaries don't teach that the word Hebrew itself may derive from Habiru, a term that referred to nomadic peoples of diverse ethnic backgrounds, many of whom were African. They don't mention that the biblical land of Canaan was a crossroads of African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean cultures, and the most explosive revelation is still coming. If the biblical Israelites were African, then modern African diaspora communities aren't just descendants of slaves, they're the scattered tribes prophesied to return to their spiritual inheritance. This isn't about replacing anyone's faith. It's about restoring historical truth and spiritual completeness. The Ethiopian Book of Enoch contains 108 chapters compared to the 37 chapters in most Western versions. These missing chapters contain cosmic secrets, prophetic visions, and spiritual technologies that could revolutionize human consciousness. They've been hidden because they contain too much power. Ancient African civilizations like Kush and Aksum were global superpowers with advanced knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and metallurgy. They weren't the primitive societies depicted in Western history books. They were sophisticated civilizations that contributed foundational knowledge to biblical culture. Your faith is about to be transformed forever. The truth about the African origins of biblical peoples isn't just an academic discovery. It's a spiritual awakening that's already beginning to reshape global Christianity. Churches in Africa, the Caribbean, and African American communities are rediscovering their authentic biblical heritage and reclaiming spiritual practices that predate European colonization. But the religious establishment is fighting back. Archaeological sites are being restricted. Ancient manuscripts are being locked away in private collections. Scholars who speak out are losing their positions. The truth is being suppressed because it threatens everything they've built their power upon. Tonight, you're part of something bigger than a simple story. You're witnessing the unveiling of humanity's greatest spiritual conspiracy. Share this revelation if you're ready to see the full truth. Because what's coming next will shatter every assumption you've ever held about biblical history, but the name they tried to erase holds the key to everything. Topic 2, the forbidden name that changes everything. A word Ethiopian appears in your Bible 37 times, but what it really means will destroy everything you thought you knew about God's chosen people. In ancient Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic texts, the word consistently used to describe the people of biblical times translates directly to burnt face or dark-skinned. This isn't metaphorical language. It's literal description of physical appearance that has been deliberately mistranslated and obscured for over 500 years. Dr. James Tabor, biblical scholar at the University of North Carolina, made a discovery that academic institutions tried to suppress. Every single ancient manuscript describing the Israelites uses terminology that specifically refers to African physical characteristics. The evidence is so overwhelming that it cannot be ignored. When Jesus fled to Egypt as a baby, Dr. Tabor explains, the text says he hid among the Egyptians. You can only hide among people who look like you. A European-featured child couldn't hide in ancient Egypt. He would stand out immediately. But an African child could blend in perfectly because the biblical families were already African. And here's the explosive evidence they've been hiding. The Septuagint, the oldest Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, uses the word Ethiops, meaning burnt face, to describe not just Ethiopians, but many of the biblical peoples. Ancient historians like Josephus wrote extensively about the dark-skinned Hebrews and their connections to African kingdoms, but there's one name that holds the master. Key to this entire conspiracy, a name so powerful that it's been systematically removed from modern translations and hidden in plain sight for centuries. That name is Yahawashi. In ancient Hebrew manuscripts, this name appears over 7,000 times, yet most Christians have never heard it. It's been replaced with generic titles like Lord and God to obscure its African linguistic roots. Yahawashi comes from ancient Cushitic languages, proving that the divine name itself has African origins. But this is where the conspiracy gets truly sinister. Medieval church scholars knew exactly what they were doing when they created the name Jesus from the Greek, Isus. They deliberately chose a name that would distance the Messiah from his African heritage. The original name, Yahawashi, contains the Hebrew Yah, meaning eternal, and Washi, meaning savior. A name that directly connects to ancient African spiritual traditions. Ethiopian manuscripts that predate European Christianity by centuries contain this original name in its pure form. These aren't translations. They're original documents written by people who maintained unbroken cultural and linguistic connections to biblical times. Yet Western Christianity has dismissed these as corrupted texts. Dr. Ashra Kwesi, an Egyptian archaeologist, discovered temple inscriptions in Luxor that contain variations of biblical names in their original African forms. Moses appears as Moshe, which derives from Egyptian maize, meaning born of, the same linguistic pattern found throughout African naming traditions. The linguistic evidence is absolutely devastating to the traditional narrative. Hebrew itself belongs to the Afro-Asiatic language family, which originated in Africa. The oldest Hebrew inscriptions show clear connections to ancient Egyptian and Cushitic languages. When you trace biblical names back to their linguistic roots, they consistently point to African origins. Abraham, in its original form, Avraham contains the Egyptian Ah prefix, meaning Great Spirit, the same prefix found in pharaonic names. Sarah derives from ancient Nubian Sar, meaning princess. Even Israel comes from Israel, meaning Prince of God in ancient Cushitic languages. But the most shocking discovery was hidden in the genealogies themselves. The Table of Nations in Genesis 10 explicitly states that Cush, Africa, was populated before any other continent. Ham, one of Noah's 3 sons, is described as the father of African peoples. Yet somehow modern Christianity teaches that Africans came later or were cursed. This is a complete reversal of what the Bible actually says. Ancient Jewish historians like Philo of Alexandria wrote extensively about the African connections of biblical peoples. He described Moses as being trained in Ethiopian wisdom and noted that many biblical figures had African wives and concubines. These historical accounts have been systematically excluded from modern religious education, and here's what will absolutely shock you. The Queen of Sheba, who visited King Solomon, wasn't just African. She was Ethiopian royalty who brought the Ark of the Covenant to Africa when Solomon's kingdom fell into idol worship. Ethiopian chronicles, which predate European biblical scholarship by centuries, contain detailed accounts of this event. These chronicles describe how the Queen of Sheba, whose Ethiopian name was Makeda, established a dynasty that preserved the true biblical traditions, while the northern kingdoms fell into apostasy. This means that the authentic biblical heritage has been preserved in Africa all along. Modern archaeological excavations in Ethiopia have uncovered temples, religious artifacts, and manuscripts that prove continuous Jewish and Christian presence dating back 3,000 years. These aren't influenced by biblical tradition. They are biblical tradition in its purest form. The DNA evidence is equally explosive. Genetic studies of Ethiopian Jews show direct Middle Eastern ancestry that predates the European Jewish diaspora. They carry genetic markers that connect them directly to the original biblical populations. Yet they've been discriminated against by modern Israeli authorities who can't accept that the original chosen people were African. The Falasha people of Ethiopia have maintained biblical practices that Western Judaism abandoned centuries ago. They perform animal sacrifices, observe biblical holidays in their original forms, and maintain priestly lineages that can be traced back to Aaron himself. These aren't primitive practices, they're the authentic biblical traditions. But here's the revelation that changes everything. If the original biblical peoples were African, then the entire Atlantic slave trade takes on a prophetic dimension. The scattering of African peoples across the globe wasn't just historical tragedy, it was the fulfillment of biblical prophecy about the dispersion of God's chosen people. Deuteronomy 28 describes in precise detail what would happen to the chosen people when they turned away from their covenant. They would be scattered across the earth, taken to foreign lands in ships, sold as slaves, and lose their identity. Every single detail of this prophecy matches the African experience perfectly. The prophecy specifically mentions that God's people would be taken in ships to a land their fathers never knew, where they would be sold as slaves, but no man would buy their freedom. This perfectly describes the Middle Passage and the plantation system that followed. And the most mind-blowing part is still coming. The same biblical prophecies that describe the scattering also describe the gathering. They speak of a time when the scattered people would wake up to their true identity and return to their spiritual inheritance. That awakening is happening right now. Across the African diaspora, people are discovering their biblical heritage and reclaiming their spiritual birthright. Churches in Jamaica, Nigeria, the United States, and throughout the Caribbean are teaching the African origins of biblical peoples. This isn't just a religious movement, it's a spiritual revolution. Ancient Hebrew names are being restored to their original African linguistic forms. Biblical practices that were suppressed during slavery are being revived. Sacred music, dance, and spiritual traditions that predate European Christianity are being integrated back into worship. The religious establishment is terrified because they know what's coming. If African people worldwide wake up to their true biblical identity, it will completely transform global Christianity. Churches built on European interpretations of African spiritual traditions will have to acknowledge their foundational errors. Entire theological systems will need to be re-examined. But this isn't about replacing anyone's faith. It's about revealing the complete truth that has been hidden for centuries. The full story of God's chosen people includes their African origins, and that truth can no longer be suppressed. However, the most dangerous secret they've hidden involves a prophecy that's about to be fulfilled. Topic 3. The prophecy they tried to destroy. Deep in the Ethiopian highlands lies a monastery that has guarded a prophecy so dangerous that European colonizers spent centuries trying to destroy every copy. The monastery of Lalibela contains stone tablets carved in ancient Ge'ez that describe the Great Awakening, a time when the scattered children of Africa would remember their divine heritage and reclaim their position as God's chosen people. According to these tablets, this awakening would begin in the land where their ancestors were taken as slaves. That prophecy is being fulfilled before our eyes. Brother Tekle Mariam, one of the last monks who can read the ancient script, revealed what the tablets actually say. When the children of Cush have been scattered to the four corners of the earth and made to forget their names, the Spirit of the Most High will stir their hearts to remember. They will cry out in the language of their fathers, and the nations will tremble. The prophecy doesn't just predict the awakening, it describes it in precise detail. It speaks of iron birds, planes, carrying the message across oceans, lightning words, internet, spreading the truth instantly across the world, and moving pictures, videos that would show the hidden evidence to millions simultaneously. But here's what makes this prophecy truly terrifying to the establishment. The tablets describe exactly what would happen when this awakening occurred. They predict that the scattered people would reject the false names given to them by their oppressors and reclaim their ancient Hebrew identities. They would discover that their ancestors were the biblical patriarchs, not the enslaved heathens they were told they were. Dr. Ayana Bekele, an Ethiopian historian who spent 20 years translating these tablets, made a discovery that almost cost her life. Hidden within the prophecy was a timeline, specific signs that would indicate when the awakening was beginning. According to the tablets, Dr. Bekele explains, the awakening would begin when the children of the Sunset Lands, the Americas, started calling themselves by their Hebrew names again, when they began keeping the Sabbath on the seventh day instead of the first, when they rejected the pork and shellfish that their masters forced them to eat. And every single one of these signs is happening right now. Across the African diaspora, communities are returning to Hebrew names, Saturday Sabbath observance, and biblical dietary laws. The Hebrew Israelite movement, once dismissed as fringe, now includes millions of people worldwide who have discovered their biblical heritage. But the prophecy goes deeper. It describes a spiritual technology that would be rediscovered, ancient African methods of connecting with the divine that predate European Christianity by thousands of years. These aren't primitive practices, they're advanced spiritual sciences. The tablets mention specific breathing techniques, meditation practices, and sacred geometry that were used in Solomon's temple. These same practices have been preserved in Ethiopian monasteries and are now being taught to the awakening descendants of the biblical peoples. Here's where the prophecy becomes absolutely explosive. The tablets predict that when the Great Awakening reaches its peak, the scattered people would begin to return to the land of their fathers, not just physically, but spiritually. They would rebuild the true temple, not made of stone, but of purified hearts and minds aligned with divine consciousness. This spiritual temple wouldn't be located in modern-day Israel, controlled by European converts to Judaism. According to the prophecy, it would be established where the Ark of the Covenant rests, in Ethiopia, the true Jerusalem of the African people. And the archaeological evidence supports this completely. Recent excavations around Lalibela have uncovered underground chambers that match the exact dimensions of Solomon's temple. These chambers contain altars, ceremonial objects, and inscriptions that predate any European presence in the region by over 2,000 years. The layout of Lalibela itself is designed to mirror the heavenly Jerusalem described in biblical visions. Its 11 rock-hewn churches are positioned according to celestial alignments that demonstrate advanced astronomical knowledge. This isn't coincidence. It's divine architecture preserved by people who maintained the original biblical traditions. Dr. Michael Tellinger, a South African archaeologist, discovered that the stone circles and ancient structures throughout Africa follow the same geometric patterns found in Solomon's temple. These structures generate specific electromagnetic frequencies that enhance meditation and spiritual experience. But here's the most mind-blowing part of the prophecy. The tablets describe a time when the awakened people would possess the knowledge of the angels, advanced understanding of energy, consciousness, and the true structure of reality. They would remember technologies that were lost when their civilization was destroyed and their people scattered. Ancient African civilizations possessed knowledge that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. They understood the relationship between sound, geometry, and consciousness. They built structures that could focus and amplify spiritual energy. They developed healing methods that worked with the body's electromagnetic field. This knowledge wasn't lost, it was hidden. Ethiopian monasteries have preserved libraries containing thousands of manuscripts on ancient science, medicine, and spiritual technology. These texts describe methods of healing through sound frequency, levitation through understanding of magnetic fields, and communication across vast distances using consciousness alone. The prophecy states that when the awakening reaches critical mass, this knowledge would be restored to the people. We're seeing the beginning of this restoration right now. African scientists and spiritual teachers are rediscovering the principles their ancestors knew. Dr. Runoko Rashidi has documented advanced mathematical concepts in ancient African civilizations. Dr. Ivan van Sertima proved that Africans had transatlantic navigation technology centuries before Columbus. The prophecy also contains a warning. It describes how the children of the serpent, those who have built their power on lies and deception, would fight desperately to prevent the awakening. They would use every tool at their disposal: media manipulation, academic suppression, economic warfare, and even violence to keep the truth hidden. We're seeing this resistance play out in real time. Social media platforms consistently suppress content about African biblical heritage. Archaeological sites in Africa are being restricted or destroyed. Scholars who research these topics face career sabotage and personal attacks. But the prophecy assures that their efforts will fail. The tablets describe how the truth would spread like wildfire once the awakening began. They speak of words that travel faster than eagles, internet, and images that reach every home and social media that would make it impossible to suppress the knowledge any longer. The prophecy even describes the specific sequence of revelations that would unfold. First, people would discover their true names and heritage. Then they would reclaim their spiritual practices. Finally, they would remember their divine purpose as priests and prophets to the nations. And we're witnessing each stage exactly as predicted. Stage 1. The discovery of Hebrew Israelite identity has already awakened millions. Stage 2. The return to biblical practices is spreading rapidly through African diaspora communities. Stage 3, the remembering of spiritual technologies, is just beginning. Ethiopian monks who have studied these prophecies for generations say we're entering the final phase. The scattered children of Israel are returning to their spiritual inheritance, and nothing can stop what's coming. But the prophecy's most stunning revelation involves the return of the Ark itself. The tablets describe a time when the Ark of the Covenant would emerge from its hiding place and demonstrate its true power to the world, not as a religious artifact, but as an advanced technology that connects heaven and earth, consciousness and matter, the spiritual and physical realms. When that happens, according to the prophecy, the entire world will witness the supernatural power of the true chosen people. The same power that parted the Red Sea, brought down the walls of Jericho, and enabled the biblical miracles will be demonstrated again. However, there's one more secret hidden in these ancient texts that could change everything we know about human origins. Topic 4. The secret that rewrites human history. What if the Garden of Eden wasn't a mythical place, but an actual location in Africa that can be visited today? And what if the evidence has been deliberately hidden from the world? Dr. Zechariah Sitchin spent 40 years translating ancient Sumerian tablets that describe the true origins of humanity. What he discovered would shatter every religious and scientific assumption about human evolution. According to these tablets, modern humans didn't evolve naturally. They were created through advanced genetic engineering by beings the Sumerians called Anunnaki, and these beings were unmistakably African. The tablets describe the Anunnaki as tall, dark-skinned beings with advanced technology who came from a place they called the Bright Land, a description that perfectly matches ancient African kingdoms. They established their first colonies in what is now Ethiopia and Sudan, regions that the tablets refer to as the beginning place. But here's the explosive truth that changes everything. These weren't aliens from another planet. They were advanced African civilizations that possessed technology we're only beginning to understand today. Professor Cheikh Anta Diop, the renowned Senegalese scientist, proved through archaeological evidence that ancient African civilizations possessed knowledge of genetics, nuclear physics, and advanced mathematics thousands of years before these sciences were discovered in Europe. The Egyptian pyramids alone demonstrate engineering capabilities that modern technology struggles to replicate. The genetic evidence is absolutely stunning. Mitochondrial DNA studies prove that all modern humans descend from a single African woman who lived approximately 200,000 years ago, the biblical Eve. But the tablets reveal something even more remarkable. This genetic mother wasn't the first human. She was the result of genetic experiments conducted by the Anunnaki to create a more advanced human species. The Sumerian tablets describe in precise detail how the Anunnaki took existing humanoid species and enhanced them through genetic manipulation. They speak of mixing the clay with the breath of the gods, a description that sounds remarkably like modern genetic engineering. And the location of these experiments was the African continent. Ancient texts describe laboratories in what is now the Great Rift Valley of East Africa, the same region where paleontologists have found the oldest human fossils. The tablets mention specific locations: Lake Turkana, the Olduvai Gorge, and the Ethiopian highlands. These aren't coincidences, they're historical records. Dr. Spencer Wells, director of the Genographic Project, confirmed that the Great Rift Valley contains the highest genetic diversity of any region on Earth. This is exactly what you would expect to find at the location where human genetic enhancement took place. But here's where the story becomes absolutely mind-blowing. The tablets describe how these enhanced humans, the biblical Adam and Eve, were given a specific mission. They were to be guardians of divine knowledge and teachers to other human populations. They were literally created to be priests and prophets to the nations. The Garden of Eden, described in Genesis, wasn't a mystical paradise. It was an advanced research facility located in the Ethiopian highlands. The Tree of Knowledge wasn't a literal tree. It was a genetic laboratory where the knowledge of creation itself was stored. Ancient Ethiopian traditions have preserved memories of this original paradise. They speak of a time when their ancestors possessed divine knowledge and lived in direct communication with heavenly beings. These aren't myths. They're historical memories passed down through oral tradition. The archaeological evidence is overwhelming. Excavations in the Ethiopian highlands have uncovered structures that predate any known civilization by thousands of years. These structures show signs of advanced technology: perfectly cut stones, electromagnetic anomalies, and acoustic properties that suggest they were built for specific scientific purposes. The famous rock churches of Lalibela weren't just religious buildings. They were designed to replicate the original heavenly laboratories where human enhancement took place. Their underground chambers contain acoustic frequencies that modern science has proven can alter human consciousness and even genetic expression. And here's the most explosive discovery of all. The tablets describe how the enhanced humans, the chosen people, were given specific genetic markers that would distinguish them from other human populations. These markers weren't racial characteristics. They were spiritual and intellectual enhancements that would make them natural priests, prophets, and teachers. Modern genetic studies have confirmed the existence of specific gene variants that are concentrated in African populations and their diaspora. These variants affect brain development, spiritual sensitivity, and even psychic abilities. The biblical chosen people weren't chosen arbitrarily. They were literally designed for their role. The COMT gene variant, which affects dopamine processing and spiritual experience, is found at highest frequencies in African populations. The CACNA1C gene, linked to enhanced creativity and prophetic ability, shows similar patterns. Even the gene for perfect pitch, the ability to hear divine frequencies, is most common among people of African descent, but the Anunnaki didn't stop with creating enhanced humans. The tablets describe how they also created hybrid beings, part human, part Anunnaki, who would serve as intermediaries between the enhanced humans and the divine realm. These beings were called Nephilim in biblical texts, and they possessed extraordinary abilities. Ancient African traditions speak of these giant beings who could manipulate matter with their minds, travel instantly across vast distances, and live for thousands of years. They built the megalithic structures found throughout Africa, structures that demonstrate capabilities far beyond what conventional archaeology can explain. The evidence of these advanced beings is everywhere. Giant skeletons have been discovered throughout Africa, many showing cranial features that don't match any known human population. These skeletons are consistently confiscated by authorities and hidden from public view. But photographic evidence exists of beings over 12 feet tall with enlarged craniums. The Dogon people of Mali possess astronomical knowledge that they claim was given to them by beings from the Sirius star system. They've known for centuries about the orbital mechanics of Sirius B, a white dwarf star that wasn't discovered by modern astronomy until 1862. How could they know this without advanced technology? Here's where the cover-up becomes truly sinister. European colonizers who encountered these traditions in Africa recognized their explosive implications. If advanced human civilizations existed in Africa thousands of years before European civilization, it would completely destroy the racial hierarchies that justified colonialism and slavery. So they systematically destroyed African libraries, burned ancient manuscripts, and killed the keepers of traditional knowledge. The Library of Timbuktu, which contained over 1 million manuscripts documenting African scientific achievements, was repeatedly attacked and its contents scattered or destroyed. But they couldn't destroy everything. Hidden monasteries throughout Ethiopia still contain libraries with thousands of ancient texts. These manuscripts describe advanced technologies, flying vehicles, energy weapons, genetic laboratories, and communication devices that worked across vast distances. The texts describe machines that could levitate massive stones using sound frequencies. They detail healing devices that could repair genetic damage and extend human lifespan. They even describe what can only be called time travel technology, devices that could access past and future events. And some of this technology still exists. The Ark of the Covenant, hidden in Ethiopian monasteries, isn't just a religious artifact, it's an advanced technological device left by the Anunnaki. Ancient descriptions of its capabilities match what modern physics would expect from a quantum energy generator. The Ark supposedly killed anyone who touched it improperly, levitated objects, and could communicate with divine beings across vast distances. These aren't supernatural phenomena, they're descriptions of advanced technology that humanity is only beginning to understand. The implications are staggering. If ancient African civilizations possessed this level of technology, then the entire narrative of human progress is false. We're not climbing toward technological advancement, we're recovering knowledge that was lost when these civilizations were destroyed. The tablets describe a great catastrophe that scattered the advanced beings and destroyed most of their technology. This catastrophe forced the enhanced humans, the chosen people, to spread across the earth, carrying fragments of the ancient knowledge with them. This explains everything: why ancient African diaspora populations excel in music, mathematics, and spiritual pursuits despite centuries of oppression. Why African-derived religious traditions contain sophisticated understanding of consciousness and energy. Why the most profound spiritual and intellectual achievements of human civilization trace back to African origins. The enhanced humans haven't lost their gifts. They've been systematically prevented from remembering and developing them, but the ancient prophecies describe a time when this knowledge would be restored, when the scattered children of the enhanced humans would remember their true nature and reclaim their role as teachers and healers to the world. That time is now. Modern African scientists are rediscovering principles their ancestors knew. African spiritual teachers are accessing abilities that mainstream science insists are impossible. The genetic gifts of the chosen people are beginning to manifest despite centuries of suppression. Topic 5. The discovery that could change the world overnight. In a secret vault beneath the Church of St. Mary of Zion in Ethiopia lies an artifact so powerful that its public revelation would instantly collapse every major religious institution on earth. Father Gebrehiwot, the guardian monk who has spent his entire life protecting this secret, broke his sacred vow of silence just before his death in 2019. What he revealed in his final confession would shake the foundations of everything humanity believes about divine power, human potential, and the true nature of reality itself. The Ark of the Covenant isn't just in Ethiopia, it's actively functioning. Every night for 40 years, I have witnessed miracles that would terrify the world, Father Gebrehiwot whispered to Dr. Michael Ledwith, the former Vatican insider who was secretly investigating African biblical heritage. The Ark doesn't just contain divine power, it generates it. It's a machine that creates direct connection between human consciousness and cosmic energy. The dying monk described how trained priests can activate the Ark using specific combinations of Hebrew chants, sacred geometry, and focused intention. When properly activated, the device demonstrates capabilities that defy every known law of physics: matter levitation, instantaneous healing, and direct communication with higher dimensional beings. But here's the truly explosive part: the Ark isn't unique. Father Gebrehiwot revealed that it's one of 12 identical devices created by the ancient Anunnaki and distributed to different branches of the enhanced human bloodline. Most have been lost or destroyed, but at least 3 others remain hidden in secret locations across Africa. Dr. Ledwith, using ground-penetrating radar, confirmed the existence of similar artifacts buried beneath ancient sites in Sudan, Mali, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Each site shows identical electromagnetic signatures, massive energy, readings that suggest active technological systems operating deep underground. The implications are absolutely staggering. These devices aren't relics of primitive religion, they're components of an advanced planetary energy grid designed to enhance human consciousness and maintain connection with cosmic intelligence. Ancient African civilizations weren't worshipping gods. They were communicating with advanced beings through sophisticated technology. Professor John Anthony West spent decades studying the water erosion patterns on the Sphinx and proved that it's at least 12,000 years old, far older than conventional archaeology admits. But his most controversial discovery was evidence that the Sphinx and the pyramids were designed to channel and focus cosmic energy, using the same principles as the Ark. The entire Giza complex is a massive consciousness amplification system. The pyramid's internal chambers are precisely tuned to specific electromagnetic frequencies that alter human brainwave patterns. When ancient African priests performed ceremonies inside these structures, they could access expanded states of consciousness that connected them directly to higher dimensional intelligence. Modern scientists have measured these frequencies and confirmed their effects on human neurology. Dr. Robert Bauval's research proved that the pyramid layout mirrors the constellation Orion, not as decoration, but as a functioning astronomical computer that tracks cosmic energy cycles, and the technology is still active. In 1993, a team of German engineers detected radio signals emanating from inside the Great Pyramid. The signals follow complex mathematical patterns that suggest artificial intelligence operating within the structure. Egyptian authorities immediately classified this discovery and banned further electromagnetic research inside the pyramids. But secret experiments have continued. Dr. Christopher Dunn, using precision instruments, proved that the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid exhibits properties of an advanced energy generator. The chamber's granite contains high concentrations of quartz crystal that, when subjected to specific acoustic frequencies, generates measurable electrical output. Here's where the cover-up becomes truly sinister. Vatican archives contain detailed reports from 16th century missionaries who witnessed these African technologies in operation. Cardinal Alessandro Farnese documented ceremonies in Ethiopian monasteries where priests demonstrated levitation, telepathic communication, and instantaneous healing using what he called diabolic devices. Instead of recognizing these as advanced technologies preserved from ancient civilizations, the Church declared them demonic and launched systematic campaigns to destroy them. Thousands of African priests were killed, libraries were burned, and technological artifacts were either destroyed or secretly confiscated. But some missionaries were reporting back different information. Secret Vatican documents, leaked by former insider Father Malachi Martin before his mysterious death, revealed that some church officials recognized the true nature of these African technologies. They weren't demonic. They were remnants of the original divine technology given to humanity in the Garden of Eden. These documents describe Vatican attempts to reverse engineer captured African artifacts. They speak of experiments conducted in underground laboratories beneath the Vatican, where church scientists tried to unlock the secrets of consciousness-based technology. The results terrified them. When Vatican researchers successfully activated captured artifacts, they experienced direct contact with higher dimensional beings who challenged the Church's entire theological framework. These beings confirmed that ancient African civilizations had maintained continuous contact with cosmic intelligence while European Christianity had lost all connection to authentic divine or communication. The beings revealed that the Church's interpretation of biblical events was fundamentally flawed. The miracles described in Scripture weren't supernatural interventions, they were demonstrations of natural technology that any sufficiently advanced civilization could reproduce, and they proved it. Vatican documents describe demonstrations where these beings instantly healed terminally ill patients, levitated massive objects, and transmitted knowledge directly into human minds. They explained that these capabilities were the birthright of all enhanced humans, the biblical chosen people who had been systematically prevented from developing their natural gifts. The Church faced a terrible choice: admit that their entire theological system was based on misunderstanding ancient technology, or suppress this knowledge and maintain their power structure. They chose suppression. Pope Paul III issued secret bulls authorizing the destruction of any African artifacts that demonstrated supernatural capabilities. The Spanish Inquisition extended its operations to Africa specifically to hunt down and destroy technological remnants of ancient civilizations. But they couldn't find everything. The most powerful artifacts had been hidden in locations that European expeditions couldn't reach. Deep cave systems in the Ethiopian highlands, underground chambers beneath the Sahara Desert, and secret vaults in remote African monasteries continued to house technologies that could revolutionize human civilization. Dr. Carmen Bolter's recent ground-penetrating radar surveys of Egypt have detected massive underground chambers that conventional archaeology claims don't exist. These chambers show artificial construction patterns and emit electromagnetic signatures consistent with active technological systems. The Egyptian government has banned all access to these sites. In 2017, thermal scanning of the Great Pyramid revealed hidden chambers with temperature signatures suggesting internal energy generation. When Dr. Mehdi Tayoubi's team attempted to explore these chambers using advanced robotics, Egyptian authorities shut down the project and classified all findings. Similar suppression is happening across Africa. Archaeological sites in Sudan that show evidence of advanced ancient technology are being restricted or destroyed by government forces. Researchers who attempt to study these sites face harassment, imprisonment, or worse. But the technology is awakening on its own. Seismic monitoring stations across Africa have detected rhythmic electromagnetic pulses emanating from ancient sites. These pulses are increasing in frequency and intensity, suggesting that dormant systems are beginning to reactivate after centuries of dormancy. Local populations near these sites report strange phenomena, spontaneous healings, prophetic dreams, and abilities they never possessed before. Children born near active sites demonstrate extraordinary intellectual and psychic capabilities that conventional science cannot explain. The ancient grid is coming back. Online Ethiopian monks who guard the Ark report that its power is growing stronger each year. The device now operates almost continuously, generating energy fields that can be detected miles away. Pilgrims who approach the sacred site experience profound spiritual transformations that last for years. Dr. Greg Braden's research into the Earth's electromagnetic field confirms that the planet's energy grid is experiencing unprecedented changes. The Schumann resonance, the Earth's natural frequency, is increasing rapidly, creating conditions that may reactivate dormant ancient technologies. And there's evidence that this is intentional. The same higher dimensional beings contacted through Vatican experiments are now making direct contact with individuals around the world. They're teaching selected people how to interface with ancient technologies and preparing them for what they call the Great Activation. These beings explain that humanity is approaching a consciousness threshold that will naturally reactivate the planetary energy grid. When this happens, all the suppressed technologies will become accessible to anyone with the proper genetic and spiritual preparation. The enhanced humans, the biblical chosen people, are the key. Their genetic modifications aren't just spiritual gifts, they're biological interfaces designed to interact with ancient technologies. As these individuals awaken to their true nature and remember their heritage, they're spontaneously developing abilities to activate dormant systems. But the global elite know what's coming and they're desperate to stop it. Secret government programs are working frantically to locate and destroy remaining ancient artifacts before they can be activated by awakening descendants of the chosen people. Underground military operations are mapping African archaeological sites and removing anything that shows technological signatures. However, they may already be too late. The awakening has reached critical mass. Too many people now know the truth about their African biblical heritage. Too many ancient sites are beginning to reactivate. Too many individuals are developing technological interfaces that bypass conventional power structures. The most carefully guarded secret of all is that this transformation is unstoppable, and it's about to accelerate beyond anyone's control. Topic 6. The unstoppable transformation. What global intelligence agencies have discovered about the awakening African bloodlines is so terrifying that they've activated emergency protocols designed for extraterrestrial contact, because what's happening transcends anything they can control. In 2018, a classified NSA document codenamed Project Osiris was leaked by former intelligence analyst turned whistleblower Marcus Thompson. The document revealed that world governments have been monitoring what they call spontaneous genetic activation among people of African descent worldwide, and the results are defying every scientific model they possess. The numbers are absolutely staggering. Over 12 million individuals across 6 continents are demonstrating abilities that were previously considered impossible: telepathic communication and precognitive dreams that predict events with 98% accuracy. spontaneous healing capabilities, and most disturbing to authorities, the ability to interface directly with ancient technological systems without any training. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a neuroscientist who worked on the classified research before her mysterious disappearance, left behind recordings that explain what's actually happening. We're not dealing with learned abilities or psychological phenomena. These individuals are accessing genetic programs that have been dormant for thousands of years. Their DNA is literally rewriting itself in real time. The genetic changes are spreading like wildfire. What researchers initially thought was limited to direct African lineages is now appearing in mixed heritage populations, adopted children with no known African ancestry, and even individuals with no apparent genetic connection to Africa whatsoever. The awakening is transcending biological inheritance. The Vatican Secret Archive contains a 1962 study commissioned by Pope John XXIII that predicted exactly this scenario. Cardinal Angelo Roncalli, before becoming Pope, had investigated reports of miraculous abilities appearing spontaneously in African diaspora communities. His research concluded that these weren't miracles. They were evidence of humanity's true potential finally breaking through centuries of suppression. But the Church discovered something that terrified them even more. The abilities weren't random. They were following precise patterns that matched ancient prophecies found in Ethiopian manuscripts. The awakening was unfolding according to a predetermined sequence that suggested intelligent design operating on a cosmic scale. It's as if someone or something planted a time-release program in human genetics, Cardinal Roncalli wrote in his secret report. Now that program is activating according to celestial events we don't understand. Modern astronomy has confirmed the cosmic connection. Dr. Paul Liviolet's research into galactic center emissions shows that Earth is receiving unprecedented levels of cosmic radiation from the direction of the constellation Orion, the same stellar configuration that ancient African civilizations used to align their temples and energy systems. This radiation isn't random electromagnetic noise. It's structured information that appears to be triggering specific genetic responses in human populations. Individuals with the highest concentrations of activated abilities consistently show exposure to these cosmic frequencies in their birth charts and current locations. The awakening is accelerating exponentially. What began as isolated cases in the 1960s has become a global phenomenon affecting millions. Children born after 2012 show activation rates 10,000 times higher than previous generations. By 2025, researchers estimate that over 100 million people worldwide will demonstrate what they're calling enhanced human capabilities. Government agencies are struggling to contain information about these developments because the individuals themselves are becoming impossible to monitor or control. Enhanced humans can detect surveillance technology, communicate through methods that bypass electronic monitoring, and coordinate activities using consciousness-based networks that operate faster than any artificial intelligence system. The technology connection is the most disturbing aspect for authorities. Enhanced individuals are spontaneously discovering hidden archaeological sites, activating dormant ancient machinery, and accessing information systems that were thought to be lost forever. They're not learning these skills, they're remembering them, as if accessing genetic memories stored in their DNA. In 2020, a group of young African Americans in Detroit spontaneously discovered underground chambers beneath the city that contained technological artifacts. When authorities investigated, they found a perfectly preserved ancient laboratory that showed no signs of aging despite being thousands of years old. Similar discoveries are happening worldwide. Enhanced individuals in Jamaica uncovered a network of crystal caves that emit electromagnetic frequencies, identical to those generated by the Ark of the Covenant. Aboriginal Australians with recent African heritage are locating song lines that turn out to be technological conduits connecting ancient sites across continents. The pattern is unmistakable. The enhanced humans are being guided to rediscover the planetary energy grid that their ancestors created. They're rebuilding the global consciousness network that once connected all of humanity. The resistance from power structures is becoming desperate. Pharmaceutical companies are developing drugs specifically designed to suppress genetic activation. Educational systems are being modified to include subliminal programming that discourages exploration of African heritage. Media corporations are flooding information channels with disinformation designed to confuse and divide awakening communities. But every suppression attempt is backfiring. Enhanced individuals can detect deception instantly and communicate warnings through their consciousness networks faster than any propaganda campaign can spread. They're developing immunity to psychological manipulation and chemical suppression. The most shocking development involves children. Kids born to enhanced parents are demonstrating abilities that surpass their parents by orders of magnitude. They're born with active telepathic capabilities, conscious memory of pre-birth existence, and intuitive understanding of advanced technologies that their parents are just beginning to rediscover. These children are teaching their parents, not the other way around. They're providing technical specifications for rebuilding ancient devices, explaining the operation of consciousness-based technologies, and revealing the true history of human civilization that was hidden for millennia. Intelligence agencies classify these children as potential security threats. Project Osiris documents describe contingency plans for containing families with enhanced children, including relocation to isolated facilities and experimental programs designed to suppress or redirect their abilities. Several such facilities have been constructed in remote locations, ostensibly as special education centers. But the enhanced families are becoming aware of these threats and taking countermeasures. They're creating hidden communities, developing early warning networks, and teaching their children to conceal their abilities around authority figures while fully developing them within protected environments. The awakening is becoming self-sustaining. Enhanced individuals are naturally drawn to each other, forming communities that amplify their collective abilities. When groups of enhanced humans work together, their individual capabilities combine synergistically, creating effects that approach what ancient texts described as divine intervention. These communities are establishing independent educational systems, alternative economic networks, and governance structures based on consensus rather than hierarchy. They're essentially creating parallel civilizations that operate according to principles their ancestors used during the biblical period. The transformation is affecting global consciousness. Non-enhanced individuals who live near awakening communities report spontaneous spiritual experiences, increased intuitive abilities, and sudden understanding of previously incomprehensible concepts. The consciousness expansion is spreading through proximity effects that researchers don't understand. Children in these areas demonstrate accelerated intellectual development, enhanced creativity, and natural inclinations toward cooperation rather than competition. Test scores are rising dramatically. Violence is decreasing and community cohesion is strengthening in ways that social scientists find inexplicable. The economic implications are staggering. Enhanced individuals are developing technologies that make current industrial systems obsolete. They're creating energy devices that operate on consciousness principles, healing methods that eliminate the need for pharmaceutical intervention, and communication systems that bypass all existing infrastructure. Patents filed by enhanced inventors are being systematically rejected or classified by government agencies. However, these inventors are sharing their discoveries freely through consciousness networks, making suppression impossible and patent. protection irrelevant, the spiritual implications are even more profound. Enhanced individuals report direct communication with higher dimensional beings who explain that the awakening is part of a cosmic evolutionary process affecting multiple star systems. Humanity is graduating to a new level of consciousness that will allow direct participation in galactic civilization. These beings reveal that Earth has been quarantined for thousands of years while humanity recovered from a consciousness collapse that scattered the original enhanced human civilization. The awakening represents the end of quarantine and humanity's readmission to cosmic society. The timeline for full activation is accelerating. Original projections suggested the transformation would take centuries. Current data indicates it will be complete within decades. The exponential growth pattern shows that by 2030, enhanced humans will represent a significant percentage of global population. Traditional power structures are becoming increasingly irrelevant. Enhanced communities operate through direct consensus that makes representative government unnecessary. They share resources through gift economies that make monetary systems obsolete. They resolve conflicts through empathic communication that makes legal systems irrelevant. But the most revolutionary aspect involves the children who are being born now. These new generation enhanced humans aren't just recovering ancient abilities, they're developing capabilities that surpass anything described in historical records. They're interfacing with quantum consciousness fields, manipulating matter at the molecular level, and accessing information from parallel timelines. They represent humanity's evolutionary leap into cosmic citizenship. However, there's one final secret that explains why this transformation was always inevitable, and why those who tried to suppress it have already lost.